Sergeant Ethan Cole adjusted his scope, the weight of his M82 sniper rifle familiar against his shoulder. Below him, the black hollow canyon stretched for miles, a jagged scar in the earth, so deep that sunlight barely touched its bottom. Beside him, Corporal James Jimmy Vasquez sighed. "Man, I swear this place is cursed." Ethan smirked but didn't look away from his scope. "Says the guy who didn't believe in ghosts until that mission in Afghanistan." Jimmy shuddered. "That wasn't a ghost, dude. That was..." Crack. The rock beneath them gave way. There was no time to react. One moment they were perched on the ledge. The next they were falling. The descent. Ethan barely had time to inhale before his body slammed against rock, dirt, and air. The world spun, jagged walls rushing past as he tumbled through the canyon's maw. Then, splash. Cold water enveloped him. His mind screamed up. Breaking the surface, Ethan gasped, his lungs burning. "Jimmy," he choked, scanning the darkness. Silence. Then, a cough. Jimmy dragged himself onto a rocky shore nearby, sputtering. "That sucked." Ethan swam toward him, hauling himself onto the wet, slick stone. Above them, the canyon walls loomed impossibly high. Their radios? Dead. Their gear? Soaked. Their mission? Completely, utterly foobar. But none of that mattered when Ethan noticed something else. The water they had landed in? It wasn't a river. It was a pool. And it wasn't still. Something beneath its surface moved. A shadow. Something massive. Then, it rose. The thing in the water. Jimmy saw it too. "Ethan, tell me that's not a..." It broke the surface. A creature. No, not a creature. A thing. Towering above them, slick black skin glistening under the dim canyon light. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were glowing embers embedded in a face that wasn't a face at all. Rows of teeth, not in a mouth but along its chest. It was hungry. And Ethan and Jimmy? They were trapped. The creature lunged. Ethan didn't think. His body moved on pure instinct. He grabbed Jimmy's collar and yanked him backward, rolling just as the creature's massive, black talons smashed into the stone where they had stood. The impact sent shards of rock flying, cutting into Ethan's cheek. Jimmy scrambled up, gasping. What the hell is that?" The creature turned toward them, its ember-like eyes pulsing. Its mouth, if that was even the right word, stretched across its chest, lined with hundreds of needle-like teeth. It took a step forward, and the ground shook. Ethan raised his sniper rifle, hand steady despite his racing heart. His instincts screamed, "This thing is not natural." But he didn't have time for fear. Survival first. Questions later. He aimed for the glowing eyes, and fired. The crack of his M82 echoed through the canyon. The .50 caliber round hit the creature's face, and bounced off. Ethan's stomach dropped. The thing didn't even flinch. It tilted its head. Then, without warning, it charged. Run or die. Ethan and Jimmy had no choice. They ran. Darting through the slick canyon rocks, jumping over pools of black water, slipping on the uneven ground. Behind them, the thing followed. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. Every time it took a step, the ground trembled. It was like the canyon itself was reacting to its presence. "This is a government site." Jimmy gasped as they ran. "What the hell is this thing doing here?" Ethan didn't answer. Because the truth was worse than he wanted to admit. The government knew about this place. Which meant they had been guarding this thing. The hidden chamber. The canyon wasn't just a canyon. Up ahead, through the mist and shadow, something unnatural caught Ethan's eye. A door. Not a cave entrance. Not a ruin. An actual metal door embedded in the canyon wall. With warning symbols plastered all over it. Ethan didn't hesitate. This way. They reached the door just as the creature roared behind them. The sound wasn't animalistic. It was intelligent. Like it knew they were running. Like it was enjoying the chase. Ethan grabbed the door's handle. Lock. Jimmy pushed him aside. "Move." He pulled a combat knife from his boot and jammed it into the electronic lock panel. Sparks flew. The door clicked. They stumbled inside. And slammed it shut. A second later, the creature crashed into it. The metal groaned. Dented inward. But it held. Silence. Then, the thing stopped. It didn't try to break through. Instead, it let out a low, guttural laugh. Then, it walked away. Ethan and Jimmy stood there, panting. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't trying to kill them immediately. It was playing with them. And that terrified Ethan more than anything else. The facility below. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, they could finally look around. They weren't in a cave. They were in a facility. Dim red emergency lights blinked along the walls, revealing a corridor lined with reinforced steel. There were bullet holes in the walls, dried bloodstains on the floor, and at the far end, a sign bolted into the metal wall. Ethan read it out loud. Black Hollow Research Site. Authorized personnel only. Danger. Class 5 entity containment. Jimmy wiped a hand down his face. Oh man. We are so screwed. To be continued? Rocket. The silence inside the Black Hollow Research Site was suffocating. Ethan and Jimmy stood in the dimly lit hallway, the only sound their ragged breathing. Behind them, the thing that had chased them through the canyon had left, but they both knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Watching. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. We need to find a way out of here. Jimmy turned in a slow circle, taking in the bloodstains and bullet-riddled walls. Yeah, sure, man. But first, what the hell was this place? Ethan stepped forward, his boots crunching on shattered glass. Then he saw the bodies. The scientists. They weren't soldiers. The corpses littering the hall were scientists, still wearing their ID badges and white lab coats. Most of them had died horribly. Some had been ripped apart, their bodies mangled and twisted as if something had torn through them with overwhelming force. Others had shot themselves, their weapons still clutched in cold, dead hands. Jimmy crouched beside one, his face pale. This guy has clearance tags all over his badge. High-level security? Ethan reached down and plucked the ID card off the corpse's chest. The name read, Dr. Marcus Henshaw, lead xenobiologist. Underneath, in bold red letters, Class 5 Entity Research Authorization. Ethan turned to Jimmy. What do you know about Class 5 entities? Jimmy swallowed hard. Class 5 means extermination level threat. No capture orders. No containment. If a Class 5 gets loose, the standing order is simple. Burn everything. Ethan frowned. Then why did they keep one here? Jimmy shook his head. I don't know, man. But whatever they were doing, it didn't work. They both turned their heads, staring down the long, dark hallway. Somewhere down there, answers waited. But so did whatever had killed these people. The lab files. They moved cautiously, stepping over blood pools and broken equipment. Finally, they found what they were looking for, a room labeled Lab 02, Entity Behavioral Studies. The door was slightly open, as if someone had tried to escape but hadn't made it. Ethan nudged it open with his rifle barrel. Inside, the lab was in shambles. Monitors hung off the walls, their screens cracked. Paperwork was scattered across the floor, along with recording devices and security logs. At the center of the room was a massive reinforced window looking into what had once been a containment chamber. The chamber was empty. Something had broken out. Ethan stepped forward and grabbed one of the recording devices, clicking play. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker. We have vastly underestimated the intelligence of Specimen 09. It is not a simple predator. It is something far worse. It understands us. It is planning something. The audio distorted for a moment before another voice took over. This one panicked. Oh God, it's breached containment. Shut it down. Shut it down now. The recording cut off. A long silence filled the room. Then Jimmy exhaled. Specimen 09? Ethan stared at the empty containment chamber. He already knew what Specimen 09 was. It was the thing that had chased them through the canyon. And if it was as intelligent as the scientists had said, then it had let them live on purpose. The symbols on the walls. Jimmy grabbed a folder off a desk, flipping through pages. These guys weren't just studying this thing, he muttered. They were trying to communicate with it. Ethan frowned. How do you communicate with something like that? Jimmy pointed at the walls. Ethan hadn't noticed at first, but now he saw them. Strange carvings, deep scratches dug into the metal panels. They weren't random. They were words. Not in English. Not in any language Ethan recognized. But they were structured. Deliberate. Jimmy took a step closer. Holy hell? What? Ethan asked. Jimmy reached out, running his fingers over the scratches. They looked like warnings. Ethan didn't ask how Jimmy knew that. Some things you just felt. The problem was, warnings for who? For them? Or for whatever was keeping the creature trapped here before? The alarms activate. A sudden mechanical voice crackled to life over the facility's intercom. Warning. Remote override detected. Lockdown protocol disengaged. All security measures have been deactivated. Ethan and Jimmy exchanged a look. Jimmy muttered, "That's not good," before Ethan could reply. A low, familiar growl echoed through the corridors. The sound vibrated the walls, deep and primal. The creature was inside the facility. And this time it wasn't playing. No more running. Ethan spun toward the exit door. We need to get out, now. Jimmy grabbed his rifle. Where? The canyon's a death trap. We need another way up. Ethan scanned the room, his mind racing. There. A second door labeled Main Control, Emergency Egress. Bingo. They bolted for it. But before they could reach the door, a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. The temperature dropped. The creature stepped into the light. No longer hiding. No longer chasing. It knew where they were going. And it wasn't going to let them leave. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle. This time he wasn't running. The creature watched them. Its body was massive, its frame stretching impossibly tall, hunched under the facility's ceiling. Its skin was black like a living shadow, shifting and moving as if it were made of something not entirely solid. But its eyes. Ethan couldn't tear his gaze away from them. They were too intelligent. Too aware. It knew what he was thinking. And it was waiting for him to make the first move. Jimmy, standing beside him, whispered, "What's the plan?" Ethan's fingers curled tighter around his rifle. His mind raced. There was no escape. No reinforcements. No cavalry coming to save them. Just him, Jimmy, and the thing standing between them and the exit. We die here, or we kill it. Ethan exhaled. Then he made his decision. Jimmy, he muttered, we're killing this thing. The trap. The hallway they stood in was tight, narrow enough that the creature couldn't maneuver freely. That was their advantage. Ethan's mind raced through the layout of the facility, remembering everything they had passed. We need to lure it to the control room, he said quickly. If we can overload the reactor. Jimmy's eyes widened. Blow the whole damn place? Ethan nodded. Jimmy cursed under his breath. That's insane. Yeah. Ethan cocked his rifle. But it'll work. They didn't hesitate. The second Ethan squeezed the trigger, bullets ripped through the air. The creature snarled. It lunged. Ethan and Jimmy turned and ran. The chase. The sound of its pursuit was like an earthquake shaking the walls. The facility's lights flickered as they sprinted through the corridors, taking sharp turns, kicking over crates, knocking down anything to slow the creature behind them. Ethan could feel the heat of its breath on his back. Jimmy screamed, firing wildly over his shoulder. Keep moving. The beast roared. They burst into the control room, sliding across the blood-slick floor. Jimmy lunged for the terminal. How do we do this? Ethan didn't waste time explaining. He shoved a chair under the door handle, locking it shut just as the creature slammed into it. Boom. The metal buckled. It was breaking through. Ethan sprinted to the reactor panel. Red warnings flashed across the screens. Warning, core meltdown not recommended. Confirm override? Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed his palm onto the confirmation pad. The final battle. A deafening siren blared through the facility. Warning. Core meltdown in progress. Evacuate immediately. The creature outside froze. It understood. It was trapped. Then, with impossible strength, it ripped the door open. Metal shrieked. The room shook. Jimmy fired. His bullets ripped into the monster's flesh, but the wounds closed instantly. Ethan didn't stop. He grabbed the emergency fuel line from the reactor core. A thick, volatile gas began hissing into the air. The creature tilted its head. It knew something was wrong. Ethan grabbed his lighter. Jimmy's eyes widened. Oh hell no. Ethan flicked it on. Then he threw it. The firestorm. The moment the flame touched the gas. Boom. The explosion ripped through the control room, a wave of fire and pressure hurling Ethan and Jimmy backward. The creature let out a screech of agony as its body ignited. It thrashed, its limbs melting, its form collapsing in on itself. It tried to escape. But the facility was crumbling. Ethan and Jimmy hit the ground hard, pain exploding in their ribs. Everything around them was fire and chaos. The reactor was seconds from critical meltdown. They had one shot to escape. The escape. Coughing through the smoke, Ethan grabbed Jimmy by the arm. Move. They staggered through the ruins of the facility, running past collapsing beams and shattered glass. Behind them, the creature let out one last, blood-curdling scream. Then, a blinding flash of light. A wall of heat rushed over them. They barely made it to the canyon's emergency elevator, a hidden escape shaft in the rocks. Ethan slammed his fist against the activation panel. The doors slammed shut. The elevator shot upward. Below them, the facility detonated. Aftermath. They emerged at the canyon's edge, gasping for air. The ground trembled beneath them as Black Hollow collapsed in on itself. A pillar of fire and smoke rose into the sky. The creature was gone. They had won. Jimmy collapsed onto the ground, staring up at the stars. Ethan dropped beside him. For a long time neither of them spoke. Finally Jimmy let out a breathless laugh. "Dude." Ethan groaned. "Don't." Jimmy grinned. "We are so fired." Ethan chuckled weakly. "Yeah, they probably were. But for now, they were alive. And that was good enough." The end.